Hello and welcome to the Economic and Community Development Meeting. I call the meeting to order. Do you have a copy of the minutes? Yeah. Are there pleasure with the minutes? Should have gotten these beforehand, right?
Got them today at about 2 o'clock.
I get mine a week. You want a minute to read them?
Did you get them?
Yeah, I
Did you
read
get a chance to
mine.
go through
I read them. Yeah.
Okay, then I would,
You would do it.
if you're ready to approve them, Evan.
Want a few minutes to read over them?
They're pretty long, so I assume they're fine.
I didn't see anything. I didn't either. The only comment I do have, Madam Chair, is it said we would schedule a meeting in September. We're still in August, so. Well, we are going to set a meeting in September. Okay. So we're going to set another meeting besides this meeting? Yes. Okay. Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Now we're going to have the input from agencies on the process. And I have 3 agencies. I don't think they are here. I think that's why they sent these. Big Brothers, Big Sisters? Let's help. LULAC? Okay. I'm going to read these. This is their input. So this is from Big Brothers Big Sisters. Per your request, I am sending this email to inform you that Big Brothers Big Sisters does not have any feedback to provide regarding changes to the 2020 Social Services application process. KSBBS is satisfied with the current process. If you need any additional information, yada yada. Okay. Let's help. Thank you for the opportunity to submit our comments for review. We are gearing up for our largest fundraiser on Saturday and will not be in attendance for the meeting. Let's Help is grateful for the past support we have received through the Social Services grant process. We are content with the current protocol and would not propose any changes at this time. Daily, we serve the most vulnerable in our community by inspiring hope and promoting self-sufficiency through a variety of programming, including education and job readiness training. We value our partnership and could not make the impact we do in our community without your generous support. Thank you for helping us collectively work together as we build a better community. And LULAC, I will be unable to attend the meeting on Friday, but the only item I would like changed is the board member requirement. It is difficult enough to get folks to volunteer for nonprofit boards, and we are very grateful for those who give of their time to LULAC Senior Center. Although we try very hard to get diversity on our board, it's not always easy to get an equal amount of men and women of different ethnic races to be represented. It's even more frustrating to be scored on lack of certain races, male or female, in the grant process. My suggestion is to change this to read something such as, do you have diversity on your board, or do you have public, private, and low-income representative? Okay, what I'd like to do today is take all these suggestions into consideration that we will discuss in greater detail in a September meeting. So today, because I didn't want to be here 4 hours, I just want to hear from people, take notes, and then talk about the timeline and be done for today. Because I want to give everybody a chance to think about what people are saying and not just jump on it today. So we are ready to hear from members that are in the audience. No rhyme or reason. Come up as you wish. Can we start with community action since we have their... Start with community action. You can. If Tawny wants to, you want to come first?
Sure. And Tawny Stottlemyre, Executive Director at Community Action. I did send the bulk of my input to the committee members in advance. And You have the disadvantage of having me have 30 years of grant writing and grant making experience. And so I'm coming at this not from a process perspective. There's nothing about the particular process that I would feel needed to be changed. These are all technical suggestions, and you've got them in my notes there. The only thing that I added, since you all have seen this, is as I reread this before I came here today, it occurred to me that what I had not done was really thank our city staff, because I think they endure a very difficult process. They have hard decisions to make and bring forward to you, and when fingers get pointed, they get pointed at city staff and at you as council members. So I want to highlight that because it was not in the original things that you read. Again, much of this is process or a particular question on the application. Do you want me to go over them in detail?
Just hit some.
Okay, all right. So the first section of my comments is in regard to just making sure that you, as folks who are having to vote on these decisions, have the information that I would want if I were sitting in your shoes. And so I've added some recommendations about setting qualifications that you would expect to see in grant reviewers. And for this committee, not the public, to know who those grant reviewers were and to know what they scored on individual applications, giving you more information as you try to make those heavy decisions. In the application process itself, I've recommended that, well, first of all, said that I really applaud the city for using an electronic process. That's getting into the modern age, and a lot of grantors haven't done that yet, so thank you. The other thing is I've bought 5 pairs recently of reader glasses, and I can't find a single pair of them, and that's really frustrating. So give me a moment here as I squint to see what these other notes say. Partnerships. In the application, the current process gives a ranking for 6 partnerships. And my suggestion is that that feels perhaps pretty restrictive unnecessarily, because a good program can operate on as many as no partnerships or 100 partnerships. And so my suggestion instead is that the committee look at whether or not key partnerships are included and whether evidence of those partnerships are included in the application, rather than setting a specific number for a specific score. I've also recommended that in the board control section, not dissimilar to the comments that you've heard earlier from the LULAC letter, but this one with regard to board participation standards. There was a 65% threshold set for getting full points in the application, that 65% of your members participated in board meetings. From a business perspective, what a board needs to do business is quorum. So my suggestion is that we should instead be asking how often was quorum achieved in your meetings, rather than what appears to be a very restrictive or perhaps drawn out of the air 65%. Maybe it's not, and I'm just not aware of the history, but I believe quorum would be a better standard. And I'm also suggesting that something that we find as a best practice in boards is whether or not they've done self-evaluation. So I encourage you to consider that as you look at grants, to know, is this organization's governing body evaluating itself on a regular basis? And if they are, what are they doing about the results? Finally, in the budget part of the application, I've encouraged a second budget question. The existing one just says explain increases or decreases. As a grant reviewer and a grant writer, there may be other things that I'd like to explain to the reviewers that are reading the application. And so I would encourage you just to add a comment section for other budget narrative. I have to squint again. Oh. Then I've made several comments here about what I believe our grant reviewers should be instructed on when it comes to looking at budgets. There are so many myths that I have seen time and time again beat down good applications from really quality organizations because people believe things that aren't necessarily true in the nonprofit world, such as administrative costs are necessarily bad. There should not be a penalty for having administrative costs. I believe grantors should support administrative costs because every service requires someone to deliver that service. Every grantor wants accountability from the grantees. You want reports, you want data, you want to make sure income eligible people were receiving the service. That all requires resources to go into it. And so administrative costs should not be looked at as evil. I don't believe salary costs should be looked at as evil. Again, every service requires someone to deliver that service. And the other piece was education about the overall budget of an organization. With grant funding, what a grant-funded agency receives is under contract and can only be spent on that contract. So when a grant reviewer looks at an application and says, well, this organization has a $9 million budget, why are they asking us for $50,000? They can handle this on their own. I feel like it would be helpful if our grant reviewers were instructed that, no, they can't, because they can't spend that money on this particular project. So a little bit of soapbox there, but I think reviewer training would be helpful all the way around. That is the essence of the input that I've provided you in writing. I'd be happy to try to address any questions.
I think a lot of these we do. I know we have training for our reviewers. I know we do get all the information from every grant. We can go on and read every single thing. We can read the comments from the reviewers. We know who the reviewers are, so we do that. Am I missing anything that was mentioned without going into a lot of detail on things that we might want to look at that we don't do?
The self-evaluation, I think that's a good point.
Is that addressed anywhere in the grant? Board self-evaluation?
If I may.
Sure.
You'd asked me for some comments. I did the best I could to go through and gather up the comments I'd been penciling through, and one of them was that we used to have a question about whether you were undergoing, the agency internally was doing strategic planning or whether anybody else was doing strategic planning about those services. And somehow that question, wasn't on the committee for 2 years, somehow that question disappeared. And so we used to have one. It wasn't so much, we didn't call it a self-evaluation, but it was, are you doing program review? And is anybody else doing program review on the things that you're doing? And I'm not sure how and why that question disappeared, but I was going to suggest it in that light that it come back. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Who would like to come up next? Yay.
Don't know me, I'm Debbie Gilbo. I'm with Positive Connections. I do have a few things. First of all, I agree with everything that's been said about how appreciative I am of the city's partnership with us over the years. What we do is we're the only people that do it in Topeka, and so it's important, and the support of the city is a big part of what we do. One of the things, and the process is so much easier than what it used to be when it was go to the city council meetings and spend 5 or 6 hours there for your little 4 minutes of time. I do remember those days. So the process is fantastic. I really like the application, really like the scoring system. I have one suggestion on that I will make. But really like overall the process. The electronic, as Tani said, is really nice, unless it kicks you out after you've been typing. There is a thing that it does have a time limit on it, and if you're not paying attention and you get sidetracked by something, a fire or something that you need to put out, sometimes it'll kick you off if you don't remember to save. So, but that's just the electronic process. So the one thing that I would have a suggestion on would be on the output scoring and outcome scoring. And I know I believe Councilwoman Hiller, you were here a few years ago when this group provided a training on the outcomes and output. You were on the committee then, I believe. And they had some, I believe it was somebody from United Way that came in and did some training for the agencies on doing outputs and outcomes. And at that time, there was conversation, a lot of conversation about what exactly was that outcome. The outcome was to be your goal. The outcome was to be kind of like a budget. You know, these are the numbers we're trying to meet, but maybe we're not going to meet exactly to the penny. So this last grant cycle, we had 3 outcomes that we were, and I'm just going to use me personally, so to give you or my agency personally, to give you an example. We had 3 outcomes that we had proposed. One was that everybody that was enrolled in our services, in our case management services, would have access to medical care. So they'd have insurance to pay for their HIV care. One was that 85% would see their doctor as recommended by the Health Related Services Administration. And one was that 80% would achieve or maintain an undetectable viral load, which is really important when you look at the public health of the community, because an undetectable viral load is like 99% less likely to pass the virus on to someone else. So that's what our ultimate goal is to get people to an undetectable viral load and keep them there. We had said that we would serve 165 people in 2017. Is that what we were, 2016? That we would serve 165 people. We actually served 203 that year. So when I turned in my grant, I put that the projection, what we achieved as far as the number of people that saw their doctor as they were supposed to was 84.73%. So we saw 38 more people, and we missed that target of 80% or 85% by less than 0.25%. I didn't round that up. I could have. Standard rounding would say that would be 85%. The other one on our viral load, we had projected 80%, and we achieved 79.31%. And on both of those, we were docked a full 5 points. A full 5 points. So we lost 10 points on our outcomes. And I think when you're looking at something like that, you have to understand that outcomes are your goal. And when we had that United Way training, I think that was the way that was presented, was that you want to go ahead and project high what you think you can reasonably achieve. And I had several conversations back and forth with Rochelle and Corey about this at the time, because, had I rounded up, instead of giving a 2 decimal point percentage point, we would have achieved at least one of those and would have received a 95% instead of a 90%. And so I think maybe a possible way to do that would be to look at, if they were at 79% of the, and they were looking at 80%, maybe weighing that score, like rather than giving 5 points for that outcome, give 4 or 3 or whatever. So it's kind of weighted into how close you came to your outcome. That would be one way that I would suggest in trying to improve that a little bit. I think if you're less than 0.25% away from meeting the projected outcome that you gave, that a 5% decrease is quite a significant decrease for that. So, and I did not appeal the application process. We were one of 2 agencies that were grandfathered in at the higher amount because we had been receiving higher amounts, and we need the funding that we get. So I did not appeal that decision, but I think it's probably true of everybody in the room that if you're at less than 0.25% of reaching your outcome, that you feel like you've done pretty well. So that's my input.
Great.
And I would stand for any questions if you have.
Great. Any questions? Councilmember Ortiz, Councilmember Allen, questions?
I'll ask Debbie, and then others could answer as well. I appreciate your comments. What I get comfort in is that, and you and I were involved in this for years, is that it sounds like you really understand what an outcome is and what an output is and how to put that goal in there. So this would be, I'm asking you because you're here, but maybe on behalf of the others, do you feel like people really do understand that at this point? At first, when it was new, people really struggled with that.
Right, I agree. Most people, I think, do at this point understand. It's sometimes difficult, and it really is a challenge to, do I put in a number that I know I can meet, or do I put in a number that I know is going to be my best effort? If we do our best work, this is what we're going to achieve. And so I think that's more than understanding what an outcome is. It's more, how do I do that? How do I predict that? Because again, if you're going to get docked 5 points for less than 0.25% off, then it's likely that you're going to put in a lower outcome. And I don't think that's what you guys want. I think you guys want us to put in our best guess effort on what our best work would be. So that's where I think the disconnect lies, but that's just my opinion.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, hold on. Were you talking about the one that says outputs, outcomes on prior grants?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a staff
Okay, so
report.
out of the 20 points, because
Right.
you can get 20, so it's 90%, 75, 50, or 25% that you can get. So your suggestion maybe from a 5, there should be a 3 or something.
Right. Like if it's like,
Well, if it's 20, 15, and 10, and 5, where would you?
I'm not sure I'm understanding
Well, that's the scoring. So you can get a 20, a 15, a 10, or a 5, depending on 90% of your goals met, 75%. So you should have, 90%, you should have got the 20. You would have got the full amount.
we got docked 10 points is what we got.
Then maybe that wasn't the right when you got docked on. Do you know off the top of your head?
I didn't bring the score sheet
Okay.
because I didn't know we were discussing that
Yeah.
today, but
Sorry. It was on the, I can tell you, I'm a little confused.
That's okay, because we can look it up and address it next time. I was just wondering if you knew.
It was applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes on prior grants, and we got 10 points out of the 20%. 20
Yeah,
points.
because that means you met 50%.
Right. And I'm not sure where the 50% came in because we only had 3, so that I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll look that up.
But that's, when I communicated with Rochelle, it was 10 points, 50% were met, so,
Okay,
but, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay, make a note of it. We can talk.
Okay, next. Oh, y'all are here. Come on.
I am Carla Hedquist. I'm with Health Access, and I want to reiterate thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback, and thank you for the process as it is. I really appreciate the electronic application. I have a couple of suggestions. One is if it would be possible to keep this committee in its entirety throughout the whole process, I think it would be helpful. Just in terms of understanding what the process was that was set and some continuity. I think that would be helpful. We also struggle, as I've said before, on the board diversity, and that's because we're the agency that has designees to our organization, including a designee from the city council, and we don't have a say in the ethnic makeup of what the organization designates to be a representative on our management oversight committee. Thank you for your ongoing support and your belief in the social services and how important it is to the city.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question for you. We've talked a little bit in these meetings and otherwise, I think, about continuity. In simple terms, though, we change committees once a year. And so one of the things I did, and those who've watched me fishing around here because I worked on that darn calendar and it's at home trying to replace what I had. But I don't know if you've studied that calendar and played with it in terms of what you would do to make it better. We did just change the year of the elections for the council, and I think that will improve the situation in that if you think about it, our elections used to be in April, and so the new committee was appointed by May and actually didn't seat until the middle of May, when your process was already well underway. At this point, the elections are in November, we take office in January, and the committees are supposed to be appointed more or less by the 1st of February. So now, starting only this year, we would have the committee of the year seated before and again, this is getting ahead of the agenda, but if we have the committee that is this committee, let's say this year, if we wrap it up and do the review like we're doing it now and get it to the council before the end of the year while the same people that voted on that budget and the allocations are there, then and just get it all nailed. And sometimes it was supposed to be done in October before, but it would stray into December and January and be rushed. And I think this new term of council members will help with that too. But if we can get it done in October or November, then whether there's an election or not, it's nailed. Even if there is, those sitting council people will be there through the end of the year if it straggles a little bit, so that then we should have the same committee trained ideally as well at about the same time your process starts, and everybody knew what the deal was going to be coming in, and then we repeat. So you can listen to our conversations, but if you would think about that, if you look at that calendar and there's a way we can do it better, I've been thinking that as long as we work the months right, that with this shift in our term years, it ought to fix some of the things we had.
It sounds like you're thinking about it, and so as you discuss timeline, I think that it will work out.
Well, do feel free, as far as I'm concerned, to look at that and go, no, this is what I meant, and let us know.
And I do have a suggestion that I'm going to bring up to the council about changing the year for this committee. So, that is like next meeting more. So I think we might, but I totally agree. I think that's one thing we missed. I think we need to do that, definitely.
And also, and I think I speak hopefully for at least some of the organizations, if you at any time would like to hear more about our agencies and want to have this meeting and to give us 5 or 10 minutes to give you an update, a mid-year update on where we are on our outcomes or how things are going, that would help me feel more connected to you in terms of being able to tell you how we're using this.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
I'm with Catholic Charities. I think I'm going to say the same thing. We appreciate funding that you've supported us with for a long time, and we're very grateful for that. And I absolutely love the impact. So I'm to say that. And I really don't have a lot that I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has said, but I do have kind of a wish list. And this is a grant. I'm a grant manager. I'm not a executive director. So one thing I would have loved to have seen, and this is probably because we were so poorly scored of our own fault, but I think it would help us in next year, is we were given the scores but not feedback. Even if we could get what we were counted off on, it makes me a better grant writer next year. I know one of the hits we took was our outcomes and outputs didn't match. And just even, some specifics on, so that next year I don't make the same mistakes on that. And a huge one for us, and we always take this hit kind of across the board, not just in the city. I would love to have an explanation of the board, because even though our sitting board is not diverse, we do have other ways of addressing that. We have, different committees that sit for like our housing. We have homeless persons that come in, and we do focus groups, and we have different committees that do actually address it on a smaller scale. Our organization is quite a bit larger, so it is even more, when you have 12 to 15 people and they're all Catholic, it is much, and I'm not Catholic, I just want to put that out there. Pentecostal with Catholics. I start waving my hand, they get scared. But I do think that we have an opportunity, we would like the opportunity to explain that even though it seems on paper we're not diverse, we do have means that we address that. And just to review your notes, the board explanation, and I would absolutely love to have a score sheet rubric prior to the grant application process. So if we could even just see it, just to know what we're going to be scored on, so that what I do is work backwards as you write it, and then you go back and check that list to make sure you've covered everything that's been asked. It's kind of an accountability checklist for us. So that's really just a wish list. I think everybody else covered everything that I would want.
As long as I've been on the committee, I've tried to get that board diversity changed, and I always get voted down, but this is a new committee, so we'll try again.
Well, and I understand essentially, we have so many other committees within it. Even if we, again, I think it was you, that even we just had a comment section to kind of defend your life, please. You can still ask the same questions, but give me an opportunity to kind of defend why it appears that we're not diverse or not doing our due diligence.
Okay. And Corey, can they see the feedback?
Yeah, I would like
Okay.
to respond.
Okay.
So Rochelle takes all the scores straight off of the Excel spreadsheet, puts it in an email, and then the comments are, you just have to request them.
Okay.
So that's simple. I
Okay.
mean, we have a lot of people that will request the comments. They don't transfer, as you know, when you copy from an Excel sheet, so they're not on the email. But all you have to do is ask for them. We'd be happy to give them to you.
That's okay. I just drove up here to fix my outcomes and outputs immediately. So
Yeah.
All right. That's
The
all.
other thing is, I have the RFP right here. The score sheet is in the RFP. Yeah.
And does it have the point, like the points?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. The
That's
same.
fine.
It is the same score sheet that the reviewers use when they review your application.
All right.
Yeah.
Of mine.
And further, you invite each of the agencies, you used to require it, I don't know if it's a requirement or an invitation right now, to come to an orientation. And if there's a disconnect in the bigger agencies between the grant managers and the grant writers, they need to invite you.
Oh, I'm on every mailing list now. And Corey knows that now.
Yeah.
So
Well,
next year
okay.
will be a different.
Because you all do a prep.
Yes, we did a mandatory training before the before the RFP got announced.
Don't worry, I'm already on that.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Next. Name, agency, please.
Crystal Wiltz, Boys and Girls Club. I just want to say thank you for the process that it is now. I've been writing grants for probably 3 years for Boys and Girls Club now. This year, it's August, and I wrote my 85th grant today. So I will say that your process is no different than the other 85 that I've wrote. But I will say that the mandatory meeting, making that not mandatory, is amazing, and thank you so much for that. So for those of us that have written the grant year after year after year, it's good for those people who maybe are new to the process, but for those of us who have sat through it for 3 years, it's helpful to not have to sit in here and listen to someone read a RFP for an hour. So
Just no whining if they say something.
no whining, I promise. But just want to say thank you. I will say the board diversity has got us in the past. I don't think we've ever gotten those points as long as we've been receiving the city grant. So to look at that question again would be appreciated. It's just really hard to get. I think it's a pretty high percentage too that you have to get that's diverse. So I think that would be my only recommendation.
Do other grants ask that question? Do most of them? And are you scored on?
So we do local, state, federal grants. The federal grants for sure ask those questions, the ones that we receive anyway. But there's always a board attendance question. It's usually our grants, it's like 80% and not 65. So that's what we tell our board, that our focus is 80% because of grants. Also, the board giving question is on there a lot. Attendance, diversity. We miss it in every grant that we write because we don't have a diverse enough board, and we understand that. So
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
I think it's down to you. There you go.
Well, maybe you'll inspire others.
I know. Gail Kozad with KCSL. So the only things that I was going to, one thing was around the board diversity piece. In another application that KCSL does for the city, which is the special alcohol drug, we are allowed to do an additional one for our local community council. So we are a statewide board, statewide agency. And so our huge board looks not very diverse, but we have more diversity with our local community council that's more involved locally. So we are allowed to do that. So that might be something to consider. The other thing that I would like to see, because it's, for me, if I was a reviewer, the way that the budget is laid out is it's actual projected, and then proposed. Thank you. And I always get confused because I want to know, like, again, I make a note when I can, but you can't do that in EC Impact around what the budget I'm requesting from the city will actually go towards, because I think that's helpful for reviewers to know when you have a grant or a program that is much larger than what your request is, and they have no idea where the money that you're requesting may be actually going. So it might be something like proposed, and then something that says another column that would maybe say city funds or something like that. So
We used
It
to
does
have
not.
that. We
yes,
don't
you used
anymore.
to have that.
So EC Impact took the
I am-
project budget
I am
out?
not for sure. I'd have to check on that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing it up.
Oh, any questions? Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next.
Lynn Davis from Breakthrough House. 3 years ago, I can't say that I had 30 years as a grant writer, any experience on that. 3 years ago when I took this position, I hadn't written one grant. So that first year, I failed miserably. So I have to say a lot of it is learning experience and training and just asking questions and communicating. And I have to say the city has been totally responsive to that for any questions that I've ever asked. So if I haven't asked it and I didn't know it, it was my fault probably. I would suggest stressing, probably doing a little bit more stressing of the ability to train. There may be some grant writers out there for the first time that, don't know about the training available to that extent. And some may be stressing the training a little bit more. As it came up, I was, always under the impression that whatever we signed the contract with the grant numbers, that was carved in stone, the outcome, rather. And it wasn't changeable, so maybe stress that in training. Because it is it is true that you want to, you want to be conservative, but then again, you want to have a goal to reach, to try and reach. And so, and you want us to do that. As was stated before, you want us to give that big goal, but then when we don't reach it, then we're marked down for it. The 5% is always like a standard deviation kind of thing. And so I would kind of keep that in mind when you think about reevaluating that, possibly. Maybe instead of the 2015, is it 2015, 10, and 5? I don't know, maybe 2018, 13, and 8 or I don't know, 5, whatever you want to make that bottom number. But that's what I would suggest. And then I don't know, as far as the comments go for the budget section, I've always just kind of put miscellaneous in there, you know, to explain whatever was going on in that particular area where I was requesting the funding. So, you know, I never had any comments on that, and I always thought that as long as you don't go on and on and on, and there is a minimum wording available. So, you know, you can only put so much in there. So that was a place where I expounded a little bit to help anybody else out. Anyway, other than that, any comments? Any questions?
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I appreciate hearing that, you know, when you started as a new person, that the process was working for you to get the staff support, learn the system. That's good to hear.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, please. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify for you, I wasn't questioning our score, just making a suggestion that
To break it
maybe
down.
those things be a little bit more weighted.
Right.
So when you mentioned that you didn't have, you'd look at the scores or didn't have the score sheets, I wasn't looking for that. I was just saying maybe those outcomes need to
Okay.
be a goal rather than set in stone.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Lala's next. You raise your hand too.
Lalo Munoz with El Centro of Topeka. I just would reiterate what's already been said and just say that it really helps to have an amazing staff who's there to answer questions whenever we're confused, and we'll bend over backwards to make sure that we're both on the same page. So other than that, it seems like there's a lot of great ideas shared, and I'm grateful that you guys are creating an opportunity for us to be able to share our feedback. So thank you.
Thank you.
So listening to what I've heard today, I think I feel compelled to put out there that I understand all of our challenges with board diversity and diversity in our organizations. I would not want to see the city of Topeka give up on the ideal of diversity. And so as you consider this question, maybe there are ways to still ask about diversity in the application, but not be punitive when there are reasons when diversity doesn't exist. If we simply turn our backs, then
Right.
we aren't reaching towards the goal of diversity, and I think that's important.
Got it. Next.
My comments are quite different. I'm Karen Weicker with Midland Care, and so I'm just here to throw ourselves on the mercy of the group. We had submitted a grant request for some charity care, and we're scored quite low because of a preceding year and missing some deadlines. And so as we approach things moving forward, I just wanted to kind of appeal to you to consider the circumstances. Our grant writer died quite suddenly, who had applied for the grant. Several of the notices and things had gone directly to her, which we were totally unaware of. And so there was just some confusion. There certainly is a shame on us, or perhaps not accessing her email sooner. But we didn't, and we missed those deadlines. And so as we submitted this past time, I think it wasn't really given much consideration at all, and I understand that. So I would just ask that perhaps that doesn't taint things as we try to move forward and get ourselves on track with hitting those deadlines as we need to do. So thank you for this process. I also, Heidi Pickrell couldn't be here today to speak on behalf of Meals on Wheels, so I just want to say that I think the grant process has certainly, from her perspective, has improved, and so appreciated being just the whole process seems to be much better than it used to be. So from her perspective, I wanted to share that. And she's sorry she couldn't be here, but had another commitment in Lawrence this morning, or this afternoon. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dwindling down.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
To the committee or to the staff. Is there anywhere in there where there's like this lady, whoever's applying for the grant, like a second person to contact?
We have 2 contacts for each agency. I would have to look to see who the second contact was.
Okay,
on her
because I think if
agency.
that's not in there, I think we need to
We
have
do.
maybe the grant writer and maybe the director.
Okay.
Now, granted, they both could leave at the same time or whatever, but I think that would be important, so that we would have that, so that doesn't happen again. Can you check and see?
I will, yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
fairly certain that we do, but I will make sure that happens.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? Any more comments for the audience? Okay, we will move on. We're going to look at the timeline. I don't want to sit here and read this. Corey or Sasha, do you want to just give us a quick overview? I don't want to read this bullet.
Basically, I just took last year's timeline. We did tweak the very first, today's actually, meeting up until August and September. That was different from last year. The rest of this is extremely similar to last year with the same amount of dates between each of these different activities, but nothing significant has changed besides that very first
So
bullet.
this is like the beginning of the next cycle?
Yes.
Okay. It's August, September. Application workshops held February 13th, and then they're due on the 12th by 5 o'clock.
On March 12th.
Oh,
Right, March 12th.
okay.
May 10th, and then it gets into the budget time. All that needs to be done by budget.
I apologize. We did change one thing to schedule 5 reviewers. We thought 5 would be more adequate to have.
I do too.
more
I like that.
variety
From
For
three-
the reviewers.
From
for
3
that.
to 4 or 3 to 5?
I think we had, did we have?
How many
we had
reviewers
4?
did
You have 4.
We had 4 last year with staff scoring those 2 items.
Any suggestions, comments, questions?
I did have some, and I don't know where you want me to start, because some were about, like, I had a question about the 5 and whether we could say 3 to 5. And then I had some comments about the timeline and some new things that I think ought to get added in, and some comments on the
In the
particular
timeline?
dates. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And it had to do with how things went this year. If you want me to start at the top, I think that the receiving testimony and developing the priorities in August and September sounds great. Maybe not really till September. I mean, I know that you wanted to get us started earlier, but when the budget deadline is the 25th of August, and the committee that year, if somehow the number is different, needs to reconvene and do some reallocation for current year, it's probably, which is down at the bottom there. I mean, it says that the committee would affirm or adjust recommendations based on the adopted budget. The budget doesn't get adopted until mid to late August. And so if there were ever going to be changes in the budget, it would be after August 25th when the budget is submitted to the state. That would have to happen in September, probably.
But if it's not, then we could meet in September, or August.
Understood. And so the August, September is okay.
Okay.
But, I mean, again, the way we've handled the budget has changed now, and we're not hammering all the way through July and August like we used to. You didn't ever have that experience, but we've been meeting all the time and long hours, and so a little break at the end of August was very welcome. So that's fine. I do think, though, that in terms of sending those priorities and recommendations to the council, that should happen in October or November. A, because it's still fresh in the minds of the committee. B, because the committee's term really is just through the end of the year. But that way, everything has been processed in a very timely manner. If the committee changes the following year, generally there'll be at least a few seasoned people that will carry over. Generally 2 out of the 3 would have been on the council the prior year to carry the...
Well, my suggestion is going to be to change the council procedures to have this committee be from August through July.
Well, that would change this whole thing.
No, because your first one's August. No, it would start right here, August. Because this is the newest, this is the beginning of the next cycle. So you'd have your people right here at the beginning of the next cycle.
But you have a council change. I mean, our committees are appointed in February.
It doesn't have to be. I
Well,
mean,
but
not for
because
this
of
one.
elections and so on, it's gonna run up every other year. There's elections that would change who the pool of council members are available and could change the committee membership anyway. We've kind of tackled that on some others where you're out of sync with the city's
Well, then have it
election
be
year.
October. So I just think it needs to be, I don't think you need to start a new process until you got this committee set for the year. So if you're going to start the 2020 process in January, I don't think you should start it in January.
Well, my thought is that you don't do anything in January or February with the committee. You get everything locked before the end of the year, well before the end of the year. You get right on it to do your review. And then once you've finished at the committee level, have decided what your recommendation would be for priorities, for calendar, for dollars, that get communicated to the sitting council before the end of the year. And whether there's an election or not, all those people will be the same through December. But
See,
then
I'd
there will
rather
be a
them be,
change in January every other year.
I'd rather them be part of the process.
But the ones that are brand new are brand new anyway.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be, and anyway, and we can go back, but if we go ahead and report to the council in October or November, get that closed out, everybody knows what it is, no rush, and then have the first meeting of the committee, which is not on here, sometime in late February after it's been appointed, and have training for the committee.
Training
on the process, a review of what was adopted back the prior year, how the process is going to go, at least an overview, and I had this written down better at home, I'll bring it, on what outcomes are, on whether there are any elements in the process that are optional.
And why do we need to know that if we're not scoring, if we're not reviewing?
Because we're the ones who are reviewing the scoring and are making and defending those allocations. And the reason, and the city council put this whole process in committee because they wanted the committee to be responsible for it. They wanted the committee and the council to own it. And so to have the council aware of what that process refreshed right when the process is starting, so that as things go through, we defer to staff for the training, for the consultation, all of that, but at least we're briefed at when the process is starting as to what it is internally as well as how it's going to go. And so because we got caught short on that this year unintentionally, but we needed to review it. So anyway, sometime end of February, 1st of March. Did you want to insert something?
I just wanted to reiterate, and then that makes social services a little bit uneasy because, like, when we came in, and I'm like, I'm not gonna, you guys have already said that, and I wanted to get up to speed, and so I think that would be a good thing now that we know. I mean, this year was rocky. We changed our election year, and so when we came in. But next year we could do it, like she said, the first part of February, or sometime in February. to get up to speed with staff, because then we had to go around and try to get up to speed with staff, try to figure out, the system and everything. And I understand you want the committee to stay the same. I understand that. I think this would be a good training process for the committee or the council members, whoever is on this committee. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. In a perfect world, it would, but in this world, it wouldn't. We had Jeff Cohen. Let's say he was in my seat and he got elected in November. In January, he's starting another job. So this has to be, you're always going to have that turnover. You're always going to have that rollover. And then I know council members desire to be on certain committees, and that's great. So they kind of try to put us where we want to be or where we can be. But I think that would be very, very helpful because the process has changed so much. It is a lot smoother, and I think just to have that piece where staff can train us, I think that would be great. And I think that'd be beneficial to you if you wanted to come and review. Or I did hear somebody say stress the ability to train and learn. I think that'd be a perfect opportunity way before the process. We kick that out in February. So I would recommend that, like to see that too.
And I think that's a good idea. However, I'm torn between the fact that it's not our job to make sure they do their job. It's city manager's job. They do their job, city manager's job. It gets to us. We don't need to go back and rescore and relook and make sure they did their job. Ours is to approve or disapprove.
But we need to know what we're doing.
But sure, you need to know what we're doing, but I'm not going to go back and review and score.
We are the ones who take the appeals. If something doesn't go right with the process, they're going to appeal to us, and we need to be familiar enough with it that they can have confidence that we're familiar with what those things mean and can look at it if we need to. We each have not an obligation, but the right to sit down and look at those scores and look at those comments before we come in. We need to know what we're looking at. We do get invited to sit in with the reviewers to learn the EC impact. and that's good too. It's just our job, and one of the reasons that the council sent it to the committee in this way was they wanted to have the committee engaged enough with it that everybody had confidence that the process and the substance was going well, so that even with the appeals at the committee level, there was no reason for anybody to go like we had before and all line up and talk to the council directly because they did not have confidence in the process. And so the dedication of our time for that. So I'll go back through some of these other things.
And not only that, if I may add, I want to be able to look at everything. Things happen. I know there were some miscalculations. I don't think they were intentional. But even with another pair of eyes, we might have caught that. And I think there was a couple scores that we caught.
So we should have caught that. We should have went
No.
back
I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying we could if we're going through the process. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to do their job, but I want to make sure that I know and going through the scoring that I understand it, and maybe we would have caught it. I don't think it was intentional, but that's just another pair of eyes.
And I do agree with I don't have anything against that, but what do we do with appeals? We send it to staff.
All right, but we got copies of those proposals. The way we got this process to this point was that as we all grew and learned, the staff and the committee, and with the input from the agencies, was we read those proposals, and we had to, because that's the only way. You can't avoid doing that if there's a question about the integrity of the process. You have to look at it. But
there's 5 layers before it gets to us.
I'm just saying, my point is we need to be apprised.
Yes, we
do. The new committee needs to get inside the process and so on. As far as the calendar goes, going down to review where it says the 5 reviewers, this isn't a calendar thing, but I think 3 to 5, I think I know why the staff has that, but it can vary year to year who you can find and so on. But I do think we should put a date in there and suggest that they are, I'm playing with this a little bit, but that they are secured by April 1.
Why?
Yeah.
because they need to be secured early enough in the process that if something happens, that they're already ready. They also need their training in advance of when they're being asked to review. And if they're being asked to review, to start their scoring around the 1st of May, then they need to be secured so that there's time to do their training during the month of April.
However, I think staff knows that. Why do we have to give them a date? They know when they have to have them and how.
This is
what the
just our
process is.
everybody's reference point to make sure that we don't have to think about it every year. So
What's our timeline?
yeah, it's our timeline, and so their training needs to happen in April. We did get invited to join that, so if we want to join that, we can before the scoring gets done. Then the 10th and the 13th, all that looked fine. Clarification, when it says the week of May 13th, I got worried that this May 10th deadline. Oh, wait a minute. I'm off, and I apologize for that. The applications are due March the 12th, so the staff is going to review, and the applicants are going to get notified by March 20th. Those file reviewers need to be secured by March 1, and their training needs to happen in March in order for them to have been trained before they're ready to start. They need to be trained before March the 20th.
The notification that's listed by March 20th is if the proposals.
Right. So they might actually be given the files to review earlier than that.
Staff takes care of the process.
Right. I knew that. I just, in terms of calendaring when we needed the review team, we need them by March 1, really, or earlier, right?
If I can interject for a second, if we have our first meeting in late February and we haven't adopted the priorities yet,
Those should have been done in October or November. Because that brand new committee can't be doing that. That has to be done
Already
from the
set
year
in stone,
before.
yeah.
okay, I'm just making sure that we still have enough time to put the RFP out by the 12th.
Well, what I'm saying is this funding, where it says City Council adopts budget priorities, that happened in October or November, not January 2nd.
Okay.
So that's all long done, everybody knows, and you've got plenty of time and any changes in anything has long been settled, and you're not rushed. If the scoring is going to be provided to the ECD members by May 10th, so that your thought is that means sometime between the 1st and the 10th of May, maybe? We got caught, pressing kind of a condensed schedule. I didn't want it to be too tight. Because it's troublesome to get people scheduled for a meeting, or the city's starting its budget hearings or something.
So the reviewers met on more than one meeting.
Right.
And I believe that occurred in April.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
So we're giving ourselves a little bit of cushion there by selecting the May 10th date. I would request that if we select a date of March 1 by which the city staff has to select viewers, that it's not a hard, because that's a big ask. We had a debriefing with the reviewers this year, and they shared with us that process takes about 4 hours. So we go through well over the 4 members that we ended up with this process in that request to get folks to do this for us. So
Right.
Are we able to use the same reviewers? Are
no,
they?
two of the reviewers from this said they wouldn't be again for us because of time.
Okay.
So we'd love that. That would be ideal. But and great committee. Okay. So you guys saw that. That makes me a little nervous by March 1st.
But, you know, if it's that hard, if we're asking for something big, we don't want to wait till the last minute to start asking. Yeah, I knew that. I mean, this is a kind of a guide, as I've always understood it, for both the staff deadlines and as well as the committee chair, who may be new to the committee as well. Maybe the solution here would be, you know, if I were the chair, I'd be looking at it going, okay, I got to have a meeting around the 10th of May. If what we're really looking at is that the committee would meet sometime between the 1st and the 10th of May, that pops a parameter to the reviewers and the staff that you really are trying to get it done in April.
Right, that's why, I mean, we've got
Yeah.
by May 10th.
Mm-hmm. Because then the appeals, let's see. Scoring is done by the 10th, or would be given to the committee by the 10th. I see. And then we meet the week of the 13th, which should be like the 13th to the 17th, I assume. And then the appeal process closes the week of the 20th. I mean, we might not meet until the 17th of May.
The appeal process is 7 days, regardless of when you meet.
Okay.
In order for the agencies to make. Yeah.
Right, and so,
Submit it. I don't.
so a
think
week
that's
later
according to
is,
their meeting. No. What that is talking about is that they have that week. Of theirs.
okay. Why would it be so long before we are ready to submit to council after the week of the, whatever it would be, May 27th? May 24th, I guess.
That deadline is, I mean, that's the deadline. Finance tells us that they need that
Okay.
recommendation by
Okay.
the third week of June. So it puts by June 18th in there. That
You said finance says that?
Yes.
If you could put that in parentheses, per
That's the-
finance, that would be helpful.
Sure.
So we know it's not you guys setting it, why we're doing that.
Because I guess the sooner they've got it, the sooner they can accommodate
I get that,
it.
but
Yeah.
when we see
Yeah.
that, yeah.
And then the next one that says approximately August 19th City Council, that would be mid-August 2019. I mean, that's when we do it. So it wouldn't be in July at all. It would be mid-August. Unless you know something I don't.
July, you guys set the.
Yeah, but it's August that we adopt the budget. And so that's why I mentioned earlier that really this in July affirms or adjusts really needs to go at last. And it would be after the August budget adoption, we would have to meet. That makes sense?
Do we have all those notes?
Hope so.
Good notes.
So if they bring that back for our next meeting, we can adopt those first thing.
And if I find other notes, when I find the copy that I made my notes on at home.
Well, because I want everybody to have time to look at it, think about
Agreed.
it.
Can we have some rough drafts, send us some rough drafts of what we spoke, and then we can kind of tweak it?
So we can look at it before
That'd
the
be good.
next meeting.
Sure. Be good. Thanks.
Okay, any other items? So our next meeting, we'll talk about any changes, like you had sent me prior, any structural changes, like any ideas we have today, because I know that's going to be a long discussion. And then we'll approve this, and then we'll have to talk about priorities at
And
the next
dollars.
meeting. Right?
Do you
Okay.
expect that we will do that in the next meeting or that will be in a third meeting?
The priorities?
Uh-huh.
Should I expect it to be in another meeting?
It's a question.
I'm guessing I do. Maybe it'll be in another meeting.
Some of them are kind of related, so it was a question.
Okay. Well, we can see how it goes and then say, do we still want to continue on with the priorities? We can change the agenda.
We should probably just make sure at the next meeting that either way, all of us have a copy of the priorities from last year as well as the scoring grid. And maybe even the application, well, is there an application now when it, since it's online?
Oh, but you have a packet, an application, yeah, RFP.
Okay.
And the priority there, and no. Yeah, we don't have an application.
Maybe just so we've got it in hand, because, I mean, the stuff that I turned in was a compilation of just comments that we've heard today that I heard along the way, you know, before and during, and then we observed the appeals process and so on, so.
What are you asking for? We don't have.
If there are guidelines that we're explaining to people in the packets, maybe just a packet.
We can provide our.
Just a sample RFP packet, maybe?
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
that's got the scoring guidelines in it anyway, and it has the priorities in it? Okay, so the only other thing would, the calendar would be on the side.
But I want to really make sure we don't write the job description for them. I mean, I think we can look at it, but
Right.
I don't every year want to start from ground zero.
I understand.
Because this has gone really well, and to change it all, oh, let's try this for this year.
That's how we got here, so,
Right, so we need to stay here.
understood. You can't forget it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Good luck. Meeting is adjourned.